The 1.5 degree target is not a target, but it's a threshold after which safety gets worse. And we've got around about 3,000 working days to take 78% of the carbon out of the UK economy.
It's the first time we've done an online podcast with a group, but in fairness, I couldn't think of a better group to do it with, because every time we've got together, this has been fascinating for me. So I figured it's only right and proper that we should share it with others. So welcome, Simon, Andy, and Graham.
Hi, Paul.
Oh, and by the way, my Christmas calendar, I hope you've all got yours ready for the 1st of December. We're nearly there.
Mine's gone.
The title we gave to this session was actually ESG Anarchy, a catalyst for corporate change, or is it? And so I'll explain exactly why this particular group I think is pertinent to that title. But to sort of give some synergy in terms of who's on screen for you at the moment, what I would say is that there is a clear connection, certainly as far as I can see, between Simon, Graham and Andy around their environmental, their social, attitudes and aspirations. And I would say also political. Andy, I know, and Graham have worked in an advisory capacity politically in the past. And I know Graham also has done some work with the BBC from an educational perspective as well, I'd say. And I know Simon particularly has been keen to seek influence politically for all the right reasons as well. So I suspect there's all sorts of synergies around those topics. But I guess the piece for me that I was quite keen to see if we could solicit from the group was this whole subject of ecology, sustainability, and a subject I know that you guys are very passionate about. Alongside for Graham, Cornwall, lived down in Cornwall all his life as his family, so he's very passionate about the region he lives in. Wales for Andy, and Yorkshire for Simon. So all very absolutely not. I live down south, so it's slightly different.
But you don't care.
Your heart's on the other side, that. Simon. Simon, yeah. your heart's on the left, not the right.
I'm left-handed.
Proud, wherever you're from, proud is the main thing. But when we've met previously, leaping straight into things, I think the one thing we've all agreed about is that there's an awful lot of lip service being paid around this subject of sustainability, and some of the stories and war wounds and things is what I'm hoping will come out through these sessions, because for me they're always fascinating. Now I know when we chatted very briefly before, there were some real staunch opinions around what we're doing wrong in that context, because and particularly I know, Simon, in your TEDx sessions, which I'd highly suggest people go and have a look at, you talk about the sort of capitalist and Marxist aspects to your life. Capitalist, making sure the business does the right things for profit. Marxist in terms of the social aspect of ensuring that people gain out of the profits that are derived from a very successful business in sort of marketing and output and all sorts of things these days, from what I can gather. Andy, I know you've spent a lot of time on the circuit talking about sustainability, and with YTF Group, you described yourself as being someone that I think is very cognizant of risk, taking people, hundreds of thousands of people out to do what would look like dangerous things in a safe way. So risk is in your mind's eye all the time, more than that, part of your life every day. And Graham obviously have been a prominent spokesperson, player, innovator in financial services, and working with Beyond Encryption. You're also involved with things like the Wave project, which has got that biggest social aspect as to how it can influence people's lives. So starting off in terms of when we looked at the topics for today, talk is cheap, communication's invaluable, close to our hearts. But I wonder whether it would be interesting, first of all, Andy, when we chatted some time ago, we talked about the fact that everyone's trying to get on the bandwagon to a certain extent about this green theme, claiming they're going to be doing carbon credits and planting trees, all that stuff. I wonder whether you'd mind sharing a couple of war stories around that side of things to get us kicked off in this conversation, because you talked about some of the statistics around that and the fact that, share more.
So before I dive into the numbers, I want to tell a couple of quick stories that show, I guess, where this stuff starts to go wrong. And the first story is thinking about Snow White and the magic mirror. And the magic mirror used to tell people that they look beautiful, that they didn't. And what ESG has done is create this illusion that businesses are doing better than they are. And what they forget is that behind the magic mirror is a window. And it's a window that, if you look out in the world, tells you the truth. And that's a window that businesses do not want to look at when it comes to knowing about what the impact of their work is on climate and biodiversity. And a second story, beyond the fairy stories, but still in childhood, I was talking a few weeks ago with our head of inspection for schools, asking him, saying, so am I right in thinking that outstanding is the best grade that a school can have? He said, yeah, that's right. So it's the best that a parent could hope for their kids. Am I right in thinking, I asked him, that every child then leaving an outstanding school would be fully prepared for the world of climate and nature emergencies coming their way? And he said, after a pause, he said, well, that's not really how it works. I said, well, you'd be a bit disappointed if you found that out, wouldn't you? That the very best standard you can hope for is completely inadequate for the world ahead. And whether that's the governance of our school frameworks or the governance of our business frameworks, I believe we are completely inadequate in terms of the way we're framing risk and response when it comes to that. And there is kind of, right now, as we're recording this, we've got the World Cup going on, and Gianni Infantino has promised that this will be a completely carbon neutral World Cup. And they're buying carbon offsets that don't even take carbon out of the atmosphere, and only quoting a third of the carbon that they're being produced, according to Mike Berners-Lee, the UK carbon expert. And Kevin Anderson, climate expert at Manchester University Tyndall Centre, talks about it being dangerous and deeply misleading what they're doing. And to put that into scale, all of the stuff that we're hearing about carbon offsets is fairy tales like the Snow White story about things that can't happen, but they make it sound good and allow us to improve things. So to put that in context, in a higher consumption economy than ours, in the US, it would take around about something between 640 to 700 trees per person to soak up the emissions from the year. In the US alone, that would mean planting an additional 200 billion trees.
Yeah, nothing you mentioned this before.
Trees in the whole world. It's just nonsense. So we've got to get rid of the magic mirror, look behind it, and look at the real data about the scale of change that we've got to make to actually allow our future generations to create space and thrive. So it's time to stop the bullshit, start the decent, true, and honest conversations. And I know that that's something that Simon and Graham have been talking about a lot in their work.
Yeah, that sense of realism, and we chatted about this earlier, didn't we? It just seems to be missing, and the urgency. I mean, the school piece, actually, that's quite profound, isn't it? To think that your own kids are not necessarily being armed. Just on that subject, there was something else that was said in the past. I can't remember if Simon or Andy said it. That some of the largest areas of influence business leaders are being guided by when they go home, and the kids are saying, Mum, Dad, what are you doing about this stuff? And yet, it's a very emotional subject, and that, like you say, we're just not prepared and not really taking the action we should. I mean, you chatted about this earlier, Simon, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. It's fascinating. If you look at the really important things that mattered in the world, we don't teach them at school. We just don't go anywhere near them. So if you look at democracy, and I think we can't take that for granted. We don't teach kids the importance of voting. Our superpower is our vote. It's free. Nobody has to pay for it. As long as you qualify for a vote, you've got it. And we don't talk about why democracy is important. And obviously democracies have a rule set in there which are more enlightened than the alternatives, as we've seen. Unfortunately, I've got 3 Ukrainian guests here, and we can see, I can see firsthand the kind of trauma that's causing when we don't value democracy and we don't have that. You look at in business, in organisations, not for profit or profit, we all know that to work effectively as a team, you have to look at any issue, any opportunity in the round as a project-based thing. And yet we don't teach any children, with the exception of a few schools like XP Academy in Doncaster, which is an exceptional exemplar of how you can teach in a project-based and or expeditions, as they call it, because we'd have to look at things in the round. You look at things from a social point of view, you look at it from an environmental point of view, from an economic point of view, as a project. Everybody, nobody ever says, I'll tell you what, today I'm going to work and I'm going to look at the geographical aspect of what we do. You know, you don't, you know, but we don't teach them that. And then you look, as you know, Andy's just said, you look at all of the macroeconomic kind of challenges, the environmental challenges, the biodiversity challenges. If there's a little bit in there, then we're lucky. So these are three key areas. And if you look at the titans of industry, how so-called, we're measuring the wrong things. Success is in some kind of, you know, post-war American kind of frame of having more, getting more. Everything's about more. You know, the more money you get, the happier you are. The more stuff you get, the happier you are. We really need to redefine that. And one of the things that Andy and I was lucky enough to go to Eden Project a couple of weeks ago to the Anarchy event. And I looked and I met somebody that I'd never heard of, to be honest, a lady called Jane Davidson. And she has, in Wales, got now this future generation law passed that every investment decision, every plan that they have to do with the Welsh devolved government has to enhance the future generation's ability to thrive. And I was so impressed with her. I bought the book. There you go. And it's just brilliant. It's that kind of future-facing thing. And every leader, in whatever form should be held to account on that basis, from their own children, from the future. Are you enhancing the future of future generations rather than the present? Are you feathering your own nest now? And that gives you, you know, an opportunity to redefine what being a successful person is.
And I think there's a link to Graham.
Self-interest bit. Sorry, I just the self-interest bit. Go on, Andy.
I was going to say there's a link. There's a really important link between the point that Simon raised there about the Wellbeing Act and the work that you're doing, Graham. So the Wellbeing Act has this thing in it. There's a duty to maximise contribution to the goals. So to maximise contribution, you've got to know what's possible. And I know the work that you guys have been doing through Beyond Encryption around paper use and so on, you're starting to get a sense about what's possible. And there are huge gaps, from what I understand, between what the best people are doing, what the worst are doing. So how do we close those gaps?
That's leading into a question I got for Graham, actually. So we chatted and said, there was a comment that we declared this climate emergency. And I think, Andy, you made the point, but there's no consideration to the macro level of what can actually be done to get there, to make a difference. I mean, Graham, on the pension and wealth side of things, there's been a lot of focus around the assets that people hold. And I think Simon pointed out that can have the most demonstrable impact on our carbon footprint, so on our sustainability position. As you say, Andy, we're trying to help in our own way with that, but it's been quite amazing that in this economic cycle, the economics of removing print are probably higher on the agenda than the ESG impact. But what's your experience, Graham, in terms of what's going on in the background on the investment side? Are they actually walking the walk?
I think the honest answer is some are, some aren't. I mean, it's interesting with pensions. They have the one advantage, linking back to Simon's point about short-termism. They have one advantage of investing for the very, very long term, and you can make very, very long-term decisions for the better. I think the average life expectancy of an impost of a UK CEO is something like 5 years. Well, coming back to, self-interest, well, if that's the time you've got in post, you're going to maximise your share options, maximise the profit of the business, and because you're going to be out of a job. So it's a bit like the political thing. You talk about democracy. Well, political parties are only here to get re-elected in the next 4 or 5 years. That they're not here for the long-term benefit of individuals. And I think, you have to take a longer-term view to make the better decisions. Some pensions funds are doing that. It's difficult for them though, you know. I mean, when you're short-termism, you're there to deliver the scrutiny on performance, for example, fund performance. You know, if you don't get that right, you're out. So you might have the best intentions in the long term, but you get no breathing space. There are examples of fund managers that have done, you know, really, really well over the longer term. 2 quarters of underperformance is all over the press. People start taking their money out. It's a really it's a difficult conundrum. We are getting there. We are seeing smaller companies. I mean, you could reel them off now. You know, First Wealth, EQ Investors, Eden Tree, Gresham House, Impact. You know, they are all changing their philosophy, not just from an environmental and ecological point of view, but for impact investment as well. But they're small, and to be honest, it's easier for them to change their model than it is a company like BlackRock or somebody else who's got trillions and Fidelity got trillions. Just to morph over time is really difficult for them.
Yeah.
And Paul, there's a really good stat on this from a campaign called Make My Money Matter, which you can put in the notes for the podcast. And they show that shifting your pension to one of the ones that Graham mentioned, to like a deep green ethical investment, makes 21 times the difference in terms of carbon impact than going veggie and switching your energy provider, if you still had one, and stopping flying put together. 21 times more impact than that, because of course the scale of money that goes in there with an average UK investment per person of like 25 grand is enormous compared to the day-to-day shopping decisions we make.
But I think that's a really good point, Andy. That thing of where can you go back up the food chains to have the most impact? So, you know, I'm sure we all recycle, and I guess everybody does these days. And every blooming fortnight I do it. I've seen this amount of plastic, thinking, oh God, yeah, we try not to buy this stuff, and it's still there. I mean, that was a business to be in 20 years ago if you wanted to make money. But I think, you know, that change is happening over a period of time, and it's happening at the top level. But if you're a printer that's always been a printer, it takes you time to morph into being more digital world, because people, you can only move people so quickly. You know, some people haven't got computers still. You know, they but from a regulatory point of view, they have to give you this piece of paper that says, you know, this is how much this costs, this is what it's going to do, here's your valuation, and all that sort of stuff. Now we're seeing moves to change that, but it's not happening quickly enough.
Is it catching up? I mean, so it's fair to say that you're all ahead of the curve when you're thinking. I mean, as a topic, Andy, you've been involved in this for a long time. I know, Simon, you referred to yourself, you know, in one of our conversations, you know, people viewed you as a bearded weirdie because you were hippie and thinking about the topic way earlier than other people. It feels to me like it's gone full circle now, though, because actually it's trendy to talk about it, but are they actually taking action about it? I'm not entirely convinced. The plastic count thing, Graham, is a classic. You know, we all did that because I thought, what a great idea. And then what you find out is that even if you sort your plastic, the amount of that still that goes into landfill or isn't actually recycled, haven't just told you that you can try and recycle it. It comes down to local authorities that you know, at a local authority level, they're either acting or they're not. So, you know, it's not being led, is it? It's not being led at the right level.
And I think there's plenty of case studies out there how you can use behavioral economics and economics more sensibly to drive the change. Capitalism is a very blunt tool. It's a very immature tool when we look at it from the existential crisis that we are going through. Things like, they call them rather euphemistically externalities. You know, the fact that they don't count in a conventional capitalist, you know, company or economy. But they can easily be counted. And, you know, you look at a carbon tax would make all the difference because it brings in the cost of whatever you're doing to the actual sell price. So that drives investment because then there's an opportunity cost of not reducing that. And all of, so, you know, things like recycling. You look at places like Scandinavia where they've got 97% recycling of meaningful recycling, not burning them like we do. Because they've got deposits on bottles and cans and things like that. These are, you know, these are things that we've done before. Why don't we? What this common sense, easy stuff to do? Why don't we bring them in? Things like
back to
investments.
the old Coca-Cola bottle return, isn't it? You know, it almost feels we're going back to there, doesn't it?
This is not difficult. It does take political will, though, and this is why politics is important. And if you look at, you know, investments, you can have objective greenness rankings of these things, you know, so you define it a bit like we, you know, wasn't that long ago we didn't have you know, EPCs on houses, we didn't have the energy kind of stickers on the side of white appliances. you put it in there, then all of a sudden it drives the right behaviours, because then it matters, it counts. And that's all we need to do. And you know, you look at inequality, you know, places like Sweden have made people's tax returns available for all to see for over 100 years. Well, and they've got one of the most equitable societies in the world, because people know that they're going to be seen. And if you've got a standard of living which doesn't equate to the tax burden that you're doing, it gives an opportunity for people to go, whoa, 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 let's have a look. So transparency on all of these things, and that's all we're looking at. The cost of this bottle to the environment is X, bring it in as a deposit. This, you know, going on to what Andy is saying about the pensions, this pension will give you a reasonable return, but really does assist the change that we need to make. Well, then that actually means that you're more likely to be successful. Get transparency in to most things in the world, and it solves an awful lot of the problems. And you know, so you can go through in each case how you could change the world for better really easily at very little cost. You know, these aren't huge investments, but it's used a bit like judo. Judo, you're not there going like this. You wait for somebody to do it, and then you use their power against them to do it. So let's use capitalism. You know, it's a great way of creating wealth, but let's change it so that it delivers the type of change in the world that we need to do for future generations and sustainability.
I think if you can change that, you can change buyer behaviour, which is a real catalyst for change anyway. There's a relatively small drinks company called Dash Water, and it's carbonated water, but there's no additives, no preservatives, no sugar, no calories, entirely recyclable through the whole sort of value chain. And they're gobbling up, it's not cheap, but they're gobbling up a market share all over the place because of consumers are choosing to buy this rather than the sugar alternatives, which are obviously bad for you. There's another company, Dunagro, based out of Holland, and going to import through a company called Hemp Alliance into the UK, building products. And now building products, I didn't realise this until looked into it. You know, they're really toxic, not just from a carbon point of view, but from a toxicity point of view as well. And the reason why it'll work is because it's cheap. They put up a 4-bedroom house in the north of Holland, a place called Ald. I think it was 6 people working on it over 7 days in one crane for 48,000 euros. You know, as a first fix sort of thing. Well, think of the social housing benefit. You could do that. Think of the concrete you could replace over, that sort of thing. These things are coming. It's just not quick enough. And I don't know how we scale these things up. That's my frustration, really, I suppose.
I guess, well, just to come, I think to build on, to bridge kind of Simon's point and yours there, Graham, I think, you know, we need not only, as well as teaching democracy and transparency in schools and our business schools, the problem with business, for me, I think, with businesses like Dash Water, which may be a great business, when you have statements like, here at Dash Water, we create delicious fruit-infused water with simple ethical ingredients, but they still put fucking water in a can and sell it to people. Now that has got no place in a civilized society. You cannot justify doing that kind of stuff when you can be carbonating a home if that's what you want. But the logic in a limited world of bottling water in aluminium cans, regardless of how many times it's recycled, is nonsense. But we accept in an ethical business when it's a business that shouldn't exist. And until we have the conversations that have got enough courage and transparency and data behind them, you never get to a point at which we can imagine getting to an end point that's actually worth arriving at.
And I guess it's a journey, isn't it? I mean, you know, at least when I've seen those cans of water, or at least it is in a material that is heading in the right direction. I agree with you, and I think you know, overall there's not enough movement. But the problem is, as a business, I mean, I think this topic matters to people. I think it really matters to my kids. Talk to me about it. You know, and as I think you gave me the stat, that they're a big driving force for change. But the question is, the B Corp structure, for instance, we've been going through the process of trying to get ourselves accredited because it matters to the team here that we're doing the right things. Is that the only way companies can outwardly demonstrate their commitment to this stuff? Because that's the trouble, isn't it? Is, you know, you've got to be commercial.
The truth that, I mean, we are a B Corp, and it's, for us, you know, we, as one of the originators of B Corp said, you're a B Corp before B Corp existed, because a lot of it codifies it, which gives people a kind of a map to go towards doing the right things and an externally demonstrable standard, if you like. So that's good. But that's playing at it. You know, there's 1,000 now in the UK, which is good. It's probably 2 or 3 times what it was 2 years ago. But 1,000, I mean, there's probably 1,000 businesses starting up a day in the UK, you know, just to put it in some kind of context. And this is where politics matters. You know, you take out we play by the rules that politicians make. And the more transparency that we have, the more likely you're going to get compliance. But you need to set the right rules. You need to set what success equals, which is why I want, you know, personally, I'm moving my time from business into politics, not because I want to be a politician. The very last thing I'd want to be in life is a politician. But if you want to change things at scale, you've got to get involved with the political process to drive that, to get the nudge into law. And then as soon as it's mandated, people comply. Yes, there'll be some people that will try and work around it, but the vast majority of people comply. And this is where I was really excited by what Jane Davison did with the Welsh Government, because they've got it into law. And now these are driving changes that make a more sustainable country. Because you have this acid test before you bring something in. Does it deliver an enhanced future for the generations of Welsh? And if it doesn't get passed. It's you know, these are the kind of thing, the approach that we need on a much wider scale.
And I guess building on that again, Simon, I think so as you'd expect in a small country, and everyone who is involved in sustainability in Wales was part of the process of developing that legislation, but it is only government that it applies to. And although it should affect the supply chain and so on,
Absolutely.
but for me, the only way we really catalyze really large scale change is by bringing the best of what you're describing, Simon, together with the best of project, you know, third sector, environmental project like the Wave, Graham, that you're involved with, and government into the room, and work out where are we trying to get to? You know, what does it look like to live in a one planet country that's using only one planet's resources? And at the minute, to give a kind of a global sense of scale, the world's 350 biggest food companies employ 28 million people between them. Half of them haven't got a carbon target today. And you're kind of going, this is just like, it's completely unacceptable. And I think the point that Simon makes about politics is that, yes, the vote we make is important, but we need to teach in our schools from primary that politics is about how you live, how you engage with your community, not about a vote you put in the box once every 2 or 3, 4, 5 years.
What about everyone's feelings towards the sort of, you know, you hear people talk about this topic and talk about the inequality of the geographical, you know, emissions piece, when you know, China contributing the sort of levels they do, and the fact that some countries just simply don't seem to be towing the line or even, you know, looking like they're going to bother. You know, it's tough, isn't it, when you're trying to make people change, but they cite examples of those that just simply seem unwilling to do it. You know,
so one of the great things about carbon accounting is that the UK doesn't count the cost of its shiny technology in its carbon accounts because it's made in China. So all of China's carbon footprint takes into account the products it's making for Western economies, and we don't count it on our books.
Yeah.
How interesting.
We get it free. Yeah, we get it free. It's the same as Drax. You know, there's a recent Panorama program about Drax doing you know, with its biomass boiler up here in Yorkshire, and it's cutting down trees in Canada. And because it's not here, it's coming as carbon neutral. I mean, it's madness, and it's shipping it one side of the world to the other to burn it here. I mean, you know, come on, let's get rid.
It almost feels like a repeat of the everyone should get diesel, because diesel, I remember them talking about emissions being better associated with diesel, and then what they realised was that diesel was then being used in the conurbations, and therefore the carbon footprint in cities was worse. And now they seem to have shifted it to electric, which, you know, electric vehicles, which are, you know, far from sustainable as far as I can gather.
I guess I think there's an interesting piece that Simon and I kind of, and you know, Simon, Graham and I will be acutely aware of living in effect around the edges of the UK is that I was talking to local authority chief exec a couple of days ago, who was saying that the difference in absolute life expectancy between the richest and the poorest wards in his county was about 15 years. So where you're born determines how you eat, how you drink, whether you smoke or not, how you live, your peer group. And 15 years of absolute life expectancy is acceptable within our economic model as being something that's successful.
Well, I think that globe that's it's, you know, there's one postcode in Glasgow, I think, where the average life expectancy for a male is 49 years as opposed to 70 odd years, 70 or 80 years, I think. So, but it comes back to education, I think, from one sort of perspective. But equally, I think, you know, you've got to incentivize the people to do it as well as the political side. So until this stuff becomes cheaper and more acceptable, you know, people are just going to take the easy option for the vast majority of time. And whilst the education sort of moving that way and we're seeing people moving there, it's still slow. So, you know, if you took the percentage of people investing in impact investment and environmental investment, you know, through these companies that actually have it at their core, Simon's point, as opposed to just a bit of it, you know, it's relatively small. I mean, it's really teeny weeny, you know, in terms of it would be a few billion versus trillions globally. So
I mean, that's the point Simon's making. You've got to make it law, haven't you? You've got to enforce this stuff. I mean,
well, go on.
Sorry, go on.
Then you've got, so let's pretend everybody disinvests in Shell, and then you've got, you know, you've got other issues around that. So from an environmental point of view, it's okay. And Shell are trying to move, but it's just really difficult for a company like them. So I'm not waving the flag.
Yeah, but it's not difficult. It's a lack of will. Of course they can do it, and you know, if they need to do it, they do it. So this is where carbon tax comes in. You know, you get the levers right. It won't take long for them to do it if there is a commercial incentive to do it. And this is where perhaps bonuses, chief exec bonuses, and senior management bonuses are based on their future earning potential and their impact on society and things. And these aren't difficult to quantify, really. You know, this isn't like, you know, boiling the ocean. These are things that you can do, and but you need to do it at that individual level to drive the change. You know.
We are seeing, if you look at corporate voting on companies and pay and conditions, there is definitely a move. The shareholder and investor rights now are coming in as they've never done before, because what happened in the past was when you invested in funds, you sort of gave away your rights to somebody else, 90% of the time to vote on your behalf. But people are activating, you know, at the grassroots level, and they are making change. They are voting against people that are sort of, you know, taking too much money out of companies, doing the wrong thing from an environmental point of view, from a social point of view. And it's not quick enough, but it's a movement that's really gathering pace really quickly, and it's enabling the individuals to use the power they've got. Coming back to your democracy point, Simon, about, you know, you have a vote. You know, just because you're investing in something it's not some abstract thing out there that, you know, you're just investing in something and get the return. People are more interested in that, and the demographic, the younger the demographic, the more they're doing it, which is it's a big step forward. It's a small step forward, but you know, it's important.
So I guess two quick things to throw in. I think I accept your point to an extent from earlier, Paul, saying it's a journey, but we haven't got long, you know. And like the 1.5 degree target is not a target, but it's a threshold after which safety gets worse. And we've got around about 3,000 working days to take 78% of the carbon out of the UK economy.
That's scary. You put it in that.
And if everyone delivers on all of their promises at the moment, we hit 2.7 degrees. And nobody's planning for that, even though that's all a commitment. So for me, I think we've got to, this is back to the governance point that Simon raised earlier. We've got to radically rethink this. And I had a walk last week with a creative director called Simeon Rose from Faith in Nature, shampoo and soap company. And they've just put nature on the board of their business. They're the first business in the UK to do that. And if every business or the top 50% of businesses put a seat on their board on an advisory or, you know, governance basis, one for nature and one for future generations, and listened to them, so their governance structure was dialed, so they have to listen to their voices, alongside things like carbon tax, that could shift business really quickly.
Yeah,
That,
exactly.
that feels like a really good. I was just about to ask the question. What would you say to a CEO to ensure that the ESG is at the heart, is the primary business objective? I mean, I think you just cited, a great example of that. And I know, that again, it feels a bit like lip service that the larger companies, the COP26, 27 outputs, and what voice they have, I don't know, but reporting on your ESG policy and your impact as part of your annual accounts. What other advice would you give to a CEO that wants to make sure that this is a primary business objective?
Talk to their children.
Yeah.
Talk to their children and sense check what they are advising on their day job outside of in the big wide world. Just ask their kids what they think. It's not difficult. It's not difficult. We have this abstracted view. It doesn't help by the media have this perception of business, the apprentice and they think these kind of arseholes who, Dragon's Den and it's not like that in business. It can be human. It can be really thoughtful and kind, and a lot of businesses are nowhere near, most businesses are nowhere near the apprentice or Dragon's Den in that kind of approach, this egotistical nonsense. And most people, as soon as they step outside of their workplace and the kind of their KPIs, their numbers that they have to hit, they're really nice people. But quite often in the work environment, you lose the track of what matters.
And I guess building on that, there's a lovely example from Ella's Kitchen, one of our fellow B Corps, and they did this piece of research that showed that 67% of business leaders with kids had upgraded their sustainability policy at work as a consequence of conversations around the dining table. So I think definitely ask kids, but I think my advice would be to recognize that the safety that ESG creates is a bit like the safety of running over a line of crocodile backs to get you out of a swamp. ESG is a really dangerous practice that will never guarantee the thriving future that our species needs, because it's based on bullshit and spin. It's not an absolute measure of whether or not we're living on one planet's resources. So ESG can at best be a temporary stopgap until we work out what the measures look like to demonstrate that all of our businesses are regenerative, which means that they are restoring stability to climate and nature in a way that is net positive in terms of putting more back than we're taking out. And at the minute, ESG has no framework for doing that kind of work.
No, it almost feels, doesn't it, because of this, using the R word, recession, everyone's now starting to focus on other things, the loss of, probably the most important topic in our lifetimes, really, and certainly when you look at the cyclical nature, in one of the other podcasts we did recently with Chris Reed, actually at Dunstan Thomas, he said, look, the markets are very cyclical. We go in and out of recessions and you can almost predict the periods, and the conditions and the effects of recession create this sort of whack-a-mole syndrome. People make cuts, they remove people from businesses, they therefore reduce service, and therefore people get a worse deal, etc., etc. It just feels like there's so much distraction around commerciality and business as usual that it's, this has been lost. This is still being lost as a topic, which is just gobsmacking. I think, Graham, you said the other day that there was a stat, I can't remember what you gave it to me, but again, in terms of outputs in our own small way, that the amount of paper that these, some of these companies still generate is, I can't remember the stat, but you said it was kilometres high in terms of output.
There's a UK company, and they know they've got an issue. They're going to do something about it. Fidelity, where if they said if they stacked all the A4 paper they print out at the moment, it goes like nearly kilometre high sort of thing. They don't want it. They are looking for technological solutions. My question would be, I suppose, how quickly are you looking at it? Because those solutions are out there now. And
again, this like going back to what Andy was saying about these wonderful things that we have here, the carbon footprint of them is zero, and the servers, and they're this, that, and the other. So get a balanced approach to these things. And I do think, a bit like with the Ukraine war, we're seeing, if we harness that, again in the judo analogy, harness that kind of punch that we've had, and say, well, let's double down on renewables. Let's double down on that. You know, a recession. Let's think lean. Let's think frugal. You know, we can't in future have more. Let's reuse things more effectively. Let's use things more effectively than we have. We need less than we think we possibly do to have a good quality of life and have more time to go out into nature, to go out into, spend time with each other, which is, we've tried to do at Webmark with the Webmark Oxygen Farm, which is a retreat that we've got for the business. And, we've used cash off the balance sheet to create a rewilded environment for everybody to spend time with. And you can do that. When you say this, it's 166-acre beautiful place up in Coldingham where we can spend time. Well, how do you do that? Well, I said it's easy. You take cash off your balance sheet, you turn it into an asset, and everybody enjoys themselves more because it intellectually, emotionally, and financially delivers value for the organisation. It's just you've got to you realise you've got more choice than you think is possible, and sharing these examples, the kind of examples that we've all been citing here. There is no central repository here where we can draw on. XP Academy as a secondary school which doesn't teach subjects. It teaches projects, but as a consequence, they are still outstanding. They still have GCSEs, and they have to do all of the stuff that we know. But the kids that come out of there are just so much more attuned to the life that they need to be going forward. So that was a creative example of a secondary school, state secondary school, non-selective, where it delivers a much better outcome and at a better cost effectiveness as well. It blows your mind that. So why don't more companies do it?
And then building on that, Simon, as well, is that I can't imagine any recruiter or owner in any business who would prefer to pick kids who've just gone through an outstanding school that ticks the boxes and gets the grades over kids who've been through an experience like XR. Because every employer wants curious, confident problem solvers who can ask questions and stand their ground. And that's not what we're teaching. So I think for me, the biggest thing on my list, on my to-do list, is equipping, 20% of the UK population, so 10 million people, say, cutting out the very old and the very young, with the functional skills to be able to spot the dots that connect food and fertilizer and health and air and health and all of these other bits together, so that they can start to have different conversations about the future that they want to live in. Because right now, people don't know what the risk. Most people are concerned, but they have no idea how serious the risks are that they're heading our way. They have very little idea, because it's never shared on the media, about the cool stuff that's happening that they could start having in their community right now. And because of that, climate anxiety is kind of weighing heavily on kids' shoulders, rather than the kind of enterprise skills we want about shifting our economy to being one that grows health and nature and climate stability at the same time, which any good business should be delivering.
I think the time is the issue, Andy, as you say. Involved with UC Children in Need, General School Foundation, the Way Project. The environment for a civilized society that we're bringing our children up in is pretty appalling when you just look at, I think there's over 6 million kids now and, defined as living in poverty. That's not a great place to be. And so, the scale of it is just massive. But I think your point about education, both you're making, if you started there, you're in with a chance, because, you've got to start kids in the right starting line of life, as it were, really. And at the moment, we're getting nowhere near it from a survivability point of view, let alone from an environmental point of view.
But there are exemplars out there of doing it. And this is the thing, we're not trying to split atoms or do nuclear fusion that we haven't managed for years. We've tried to. These are opportunities out there. And this is where I think, we need to have practical examples of real world delivered outcomes that are better, that we can copy. And there's nowhere at the moment. Yes, laws are massive in terms of that. To scale change, you need laws. But in the meantime, if you show people how you can do that, and it's not difficult, some of these things, But if you've not, we have this perception that you can't do an awful lot of these things. And I think, I've always railed against the professional classes because they have to become a professional, an accountant, a lawyer, a banker, you have to go through these professional exams, which say channel any creativity they had into, there is only one way of doing this, to pass your exams or what have you. And so all the advice that nascent young entrepreneurs have is, yeah, you can't do anything outside of that. But when in reality, there's a huge amount you can do. You can use all of the creativity, the innovation, and still be a compliant business. So this is one of the things that I want to try and do. I've got a website and I've not done anything on it for years called freebusiness.com that I need to do. All free ideas for business that you can go and just do either no cost or low cost ways of running a better business. Try and get, harvest all of the great stuff that's going on in the world into one place where you can do it. And we in our chats before we've had these, we all know different people and different things and what have you. If we could just put it in one spot and say how, signposting, how you can do it. If you want to do this, you want to do that. There's loads of stuff out there. We just need to bring it together as a not for profit, just, not for any commercial advantage. Just harness all of the kind of great ideas and then signpost people to them. If you want to do something like that, this is how you do it.
Have a look at this. Here's an example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just mindful of timing, because I was asked this question because I think, and it may be in the context of the ESG, the sustainability thing, but if you could give your younger self a piece of advice, one piece of advice, if you can, relatively short, because I know we're running out of time, but what would it be? Start with you, Andy.
I think my advice to my younger self would be far more radical and bolder, younger, because you never know what you're capable of doing, and you don't need to wait till you get age on your shoulders before you can do it.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. Right.
Stay in contact with your environment sooner. I mean, Andy and I used to joke about this. He's a surfing bum from Wales, I'm a surfing bum from Cornwall. And when I went to London, I got caught up in the London thing, work in the city and all that sort of stuff. And I'm embarrassed by it now. And it took meeting Andy to actually change, 20 odd years ago, my view of the world. It was always in there and implicit in there. And it was what I really wanted to do. So, yeah, tap into your environment quickly, get used to it, understand it, and live your life according to it.
Brilliant. Simon.
To be honest, I don't know really. You've got the two brains, one up here, the rational, and the gut. Go with your gut more. Your gut feel. You know what's right. You know what I mean? And we don't kind of somehow we overthink things and whatever. You know what's the right thing to do. Just spend time doing it. The good thing about it is, in this world that we're in at the moment, is wherever you are, you can do it. You don't have to move. I had to move down, when I left uni, I was at miners' strike and I had to move down south. There was no jobs up here and it took me 32 years to get back to Yorkshire and it killed me, being away from it. Now we can do it here. There's a load of opportunity here. Trust people. I'm lucky I'm from Yorkshire. We start trusting people from day one. You don't have to, build up a rapport. You just trust people and be open with people. And you tend to find 99% of people are great, and they don't try and do you over and stuff like that. So trust people and share ideas with people and stuff. And you tend to be able to move so much faster if you trust people and you enjoy it more. You're not trying to be over clever and over complex. Just crack on and enjoy things.
And what's the advice that you give your younger self, Paul?
Sure. I'd really struggle to find something that would come anywhere near those brilliant ones. I think certainly with my boys, it's be ambitious, and thinking with your gut has been a phrase I've used with my boys since they were kids. But don't focus on the formality of qualification, is which you touched on before. The most brilliant people I've ever met, their skill is not in the fact they've got a piece of paper saying they've got a degree in a subject. It's the fact that they empathise with people, they communicate, and they have a good understanding. They're good human beings, and I suspect that will serve them in greater stead than having gone to university or anything else, is the truth of it.
If I could be cheeky and have a bonus, my bonus piece would be something around learn how to ask questions that stop people in their tracks.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because at the Anthropy event that Simon were at, there were quite a few young people there, which was great. And some of them were saying, we need to have a seat at the table. And you kind of go, great, you've got a seat at the table. What do you want to say? Oh, I want a seat at the table. No, it's beyond that. Whereas I've met some young people, 22, 23, 24 years old, who have an ability to ask like razor sharp questions that are said with love and compassion that stop you thinking as you did. And I think sort of for young people to learn that is that it shortens that interface between what their thinking is and what our behavior as their parents is. And you short circuit a generation of change when you get those questions in the right place.
I have a suspicion as well that they're said with a less fear of compliance. That's the other one, isn't it? Everyone wants to be, toe the line, do the right things, but doing, challenging the norm, which is what basically we're telling to people now, isn't it? Do things differently. Well, actually, follow others that have shown how you can change. But listen, that's been really brilliant. I suspect we could go on for hours, and I hope we'll do this separately from a podcast again. But thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure indeed.
Pleasure.
Cool.
So I want to tell a couple of stories that'll take people back to their childhoods before I jump into the numbers. So for me, ESG is a bit like the magic mirror in Snow White. And it's a bit like a magic, let me start that again. Was it Snow White or Cinderella? I keep losing track. Magic mirrors.
I think it was
Cinderella, wasn't it? Oh.
Cinderella, yeah.
It was Cinderella. Okay, I'll start that again. Okay. So it's a bit like ESG is like the magic mirror in children's fairy stories. And the magic mirror of ESG keeps telling
which fairy stories, Andy?
Right, this is just why we've got a bit longer, isn't it? Okay, I'm sure. I think you're right. I think it's Cinderella.
Yeah, Google it quick. But get the. Eddie, I know what you're. Shrek. Go for Shrek.
I think you were fine what you said.
There is one in Shrek.
It's Snow White. It was Snow White.
Shrek.
Shrek.
Shrek's more contemporary.
We're going to go for Snow White. Right. So, starting again with only 6 interruptions. Okay, this time.